Before this video begins, I'd just like to remind anyone watching this that this is my opinion, and I'm not trying to force it on you or tell you you're wrong for thinking the way you do. If you disagree with what I say in this video, please leave a comment or just move on with your day. I'm happy to respond to any comments left on any of my videos, so don't feel afraid to comment. Also, spoiler alert for these Star Wars movies.
The Last Jedi is an abomination.
I knew this was gonna be bad from the second the opening crawl finished.
This is a whack, trash, garbage movie, and I can't believe what Disney did to me.
The worst Star Wars movie I have ever seen.
Anyone who tells you to watch this movie or even recommends you viewing this, defriend them.
I'm so upset I can't even talk about it.
Star Wars Last Jedi is officially the worst Star Wars film I have ever seen in my entire life.
Like, to me, that felt like the director just going like this to fans.
Fucking gives them the light, says, you know, where my head out, fuck.
Star Wars The Last Jedi is definitely the most polarizing Star Wars movie to date. Never before has a Star Wars fan base been so divided on a movie to this degree. I mean, the original trilogy is pretty much universally loved, and the prequel trilogy is disliked by most, myself included.
I don't like sand.
The Force Awakens received a lot of praise from fans, with a few exceptions, and Rogue One was pretty much the same. Every Star Wars movie to date has had a majority of people either liking it or disliking it, with opposition being minimum. But The Last Jedi is very different. You wouldn't notice it if you're stuck in an echo chamber, listening to people who think the same as you, but The Last Jedi left many fans split apart. I've heard many strong arguments from both sides, and it seriously made me think even harder about the movie. In my experience so far, I've seen quite a few people who enjoyed the movie quite a lot, and gave compelling reasons as to why, and I've also seen an overwhelming amount of people who hated it. In fact, the people who didn't like the movie are a lot louder in this case, making people who like it seem almost non-existent. Go into any comment section of a video regarding The Last Jedi in any way and you'll see tons of people just completely bashing it, saying it's the worst Star Wars movie ever made, and that Disney has completely ruined Star Wars forever. Now, I've seen this movie 3 times already, I've talked about it, I've thought really hard about it, and I know what I think about it. I thought it was great, and I seriously didn't suspect people to have so many problems, but when I went home, I saw the internet going insane over this movie and how flawed it was. It's been about 8 months and I still like the movie, but why? How can I be a Star Wars fan and I still like The Last Jedi? It's the worst Star Wars movie of all time, right? Well, not exactly. I've researched and found plenty of problems that people had with The Last Jedi, and the truth is, I don't disagree with all of them. That being said, every movie's gonna have its flaws, and I feel like there's just some things in this movie that people are gonna find reasons to dislike. I have compiled the 10 most common criticisms people seem to have with the movie, and I want to talk about if I agree or disagree, and why. Luke's character was butchered. This is a criticism I wholeheartedly disagree with. The main argument people present when they say this is that Luke would never give up and would never try to kill his nephew. That's just not how a Jedi would act, and that's not how Luke would act. Sometimes I feel like people only want to remember Ben Solo's side of the story, and they kind of just seem to forget what the real story was. A Jedi temporarily being consumed by the dark side is not a new thing in the Star Wars universe, and has even happened to Luke before. Why do people just seem to forget that Luke tapped into the dark side in Return of the Jedi and cut off his father's arm, and then right after that he immediately regrets it and swears to remain a Jedi? In The Last Jedi, he senses that his nephew would grow up to be an evil tyrant who would end up killing everyone he loves, which he does, and is seduced by the dark side momentarily, but immediately regrets it with a tear in his eye. But before he could put his lightsaber away, Ben strikes his lightsaber and it's too late. But Luke saw the good in his father and tries to kill his nephew? Luke never actually attempted to kill Ben. He was persuaded by the thought. In my opinion, a troubled and flawed Jedi is a lot more interesting than a perfect one, which is what people like to envision Luke as. People came into this expecting a perfect version of Luke, since this is the first time we got to see him on screen in 30 years. And that isn't what we got. Instead, we got a grumpier Luke who has a more nihilistic outlook on the Jedi Order, and wants to abandon all his teachings of the past. But Luke would never abandon the Jedi. That's extremely out of character. Why? Are characters not allowed to change in the span of 30 years? This kind of thing is just absurd to say. If Luke was just the same character he was in Return of the Jedi, then that would be bad writing. I'm glad that they did something interesting with Luke, something that's worth conversation and debate. People shouldn't hold these fictional characters up on such a pedestal to where it's not okay for them to change over time. It's almost like people were just imagining how the movie was going to go in their head and were sad that it wasn't that. If you're seriously upset that a character didn't act the way you wanted them to, then what are you expecting out of a movie? Another thing people seem to be upset with concerning Luke is him dying. This is such a bizarre thing to me because I just can't imagine being so much of a fanboy that you literally can't handle the fact that your favorite character dies. Not only that, but I think they handled it in the best way they could have. After being old and bitter for the whole movie, he does the most Luke Skywalker thing I could think of. And in his last moments, he stares at the twin suns, giving into the Force, just as Yoda and Obi-Wan did. How someone could say this is a waste of Luke's character is really looking on the surface here. Rey is a Mary Sue. The truth is that we really don't have enough information to treat this as a legitimate criticism yet. It's something that entirely revolves around the information provided in episode 9. That being said, I think there's more to this than meets the eye when first watching the movie. I believe The Last Jedi is hinting at a new kind of Force user that doesn't have to be a Jedi or a Sith. And I hope Rey and Kylo are revealed to be that. There are many themes throughout the movie of leaving the past behind and that the Jedi Order are just inherently flawed, and if that's what they're going for, then I totally love it. It seems to always be the same people complaining that The Force Awakens was too unoriginal, but The Last Jedi strays too far away from what Star Wars is. Rey's a Mary Sue because she does all the crazy Jedi things without training, because Luke and Anakin weren't Mary Sues either, right guys? Yeah, both of those characters spent countless hours training to do their crazy stunts, right? But Luke piloted skyhoppers and was related to Anakin. Well, Rey also gained experience by living on her own in Jakku and fighting off scavengers every day. And she also has the Force, but no one really cares. But Anakin was Force Jesus. Do I even need to say more? Anakin was literally a virgin birth and no one seems to call him a Mary Sue. Rey didn't get any formal training, but who's to say that she isn't trained? The end of the movie suggests that the Force isn't something that needs to be the light or the dark side, but can be something brand new. Something that doesn't necessarily need to be taught. Who's to say that Rey hasn't been doing Jedi mind tricks her whole life without even realizing it? Who's to say Rey hasn't been lifting rocks her whole life as well? Hell, she even fights people with a staff and has been doing it her whole life. Why wouldn't she be able to use a lightsaber properly? What Star Wars fans sometimes lack is an imagination. They don't really seem to want anything that's out of the norm and want everything to be the same. Kind of like how they took the reveal of Rey's parents. The reveals were underwhelming. Now this point mainly just has to do with how Star Wars fans got the idea that this movie is gonna be exactly what they were picturing in their head, which is just a false expectation to have. Most people went into this movie thinking that they would come out knowing Rey as Rey Kenobi or Rey Palpatine, and instead, Rey had deadbeat parents who sold her for booze. Would you rather have a predictable, obvious reveal that wouldn't surprise anyone, or a reveal that brings up discussion and debate and something new to this franchise? Imagine if Rey was just another Skywalker. Wouldn't that just be boring? Of course it would, because it's a simple, easy answer to a question people were asking about for 2 years. It sure would explain why Rey is so good at everything, but is it interesting? Ultimately, if we got the reveal that people expected, you would hear people complaining about how it's similar to Empire, which it would be. That's why Star Wars fans are so tricky, because it's impossible to know what they want. They complain about predictable Star Wars movies, and when a very unpredictable, thought-provoking Star Wars movie is given to them, they hate it even more. What gives? Same deal with the Snoke reveal, to which there was none. Why did people expect Snoke to be someone we already knew? It's the same thing people thought about Rey. I thought that was one of my least favorite things about the prequels. The fact that everything had to be weirdly connected for no reason. Why did Yoda have to know Chewbacca? Doesn't that just create plot holes? Why did Darth Vader have to create C-3PO? That's just dumb. If there was just a scene where Snoke is talking to Rey and he goes, "I'm actually Darth Plagueis the Wise," and she's like, "What are you talking about?" That would be a weird, underwhelming reveal. You know what did shock a lot of people? Kylo Ren just murdering Snoke in cold blood and teaming up with Rey to kill a bunch of guards in a badass lightsaber fight. Was it cool? Yes. Was it effective to the plot? Yes, because now we have a better villain taking control. Because let's be honest, Snoke wasn't that interesting of a character and the movie knows it. In fact, if there were any laughable scenes in this movie, they were probably most of Snoke's lines. He's just the average, stereotypical evil villain, and the movie's desperately trying to tell the viewer. Some people didn't get the message and were somehow invested in who Snoke was, and those were the people who were disappointed with Snoke dying in this movie. It's not like the Emperor's whole backstory was explained in the original trilogy. They had a whole prequel trilogy for that. Would you call the original trilogy bad because of this? No, and I wouldn't say the same about The Last Jedi. Just imagine while the Emperor is torturing Luke and he starts explaining the whole plot of the prequel trilogy. Yeah, basically, your dad kind of sucked while he was a teenager, so I made him not suck and I manipulated him into killing your mom because he didn't want your mom to die. And while all of this is going on, Jar Jar Binks is given power, and I get shocked by Sam Jackson, I fight Yoda. Nobody wants that, and for good reason. So why would you want it here? In short, this is just a criticism that doesn't make a whole lot of sense once you think about it for even a little bit. Which leads me into my next point. Rose was a bad character. The main reason a lot of people like to parade around that Rose was so terrible is that the storyline for her character was underutilized, and in turn had no point in the grand scheme of things. All they did was fail, and that somehow makes it bad. Would you say that Han, Leia, C-3PO, and Chewie storyline in Empire was bad because it ended up failing, and at the end of the day accomplishes nothing for the heroes? Of course not. And it's the same with the Finn and Rose subplot. The main reoccurring motif in the movie is failure, and for a reason. A lot of the characters in this movie make bad decisions and realize the consequences. It helps the characters feel that much more real. The only thing Rose did that was necessarily bad was the dumb line she said after saving Finn, which is just one cheesy line in a Star Wars movie. Star Wars is literally made up of cheesy lines. I don't know what you expected.
From the moment I met you, all those years ago, not a day has gone by when I even thought of you. And now that I'm with you again, I'm in agony. The closer I get to you, the worse it gets. The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe.
The Canto Bight subplot brings up a lot of interesting points about how good and evil essentially don't exist in war. I used to not like Canto Bight, but now it brings an extra layer to the message this movie's trying to portray in terms of Star Wars as a whole. The people that Rose hated all that time also happened to sell weapons to the Resistance. Star Wars was never about politics. Have you even seen Star Wars? The whole prequel trilogy is a metaphor for the Bush administration. Hell, all the stormtroopers are Nazis. Where are you getting this from? But why did she save Finn when he was trying to sacrifice himself for the Resistance? Because if you paid attention, Poe clearly says that the weapon is charging up and that the ships are in no condition for that, making it a suicide mission. Brian Johnson even confirmed that Finn wouldn't have made a scratch on the super weapon, so why would Rose let him kill himself for no reason? I also used to have a bit of a problem with the scene, but it only takes a little bit of thinking to realize that it all makes sense. In short, Rose really was not as bad as most people say she is, and is nowhere near the worst Star Wars character of all time. The fans. Now, probably the biggest issue surrounding the Star Wars fan base these days is just how insanely divided it is. Just look at the Rotten Tomatoes score. If that isn't divided, I don't know what is. There's a scene in the movie that perfectly summarizes how this movie was perceived by the fan base, and that's the infamous scene where Luke created Kylo Ren. In the movie, there are 3 different versions of the scene that play out from different perspectives. Ben's side of the story represents the fans that hated this movie. Luke's side represents people who failed to see any flaws with it, and the real side represents people who look at the bigger picture and the deeper meaning. What both Luke's and Ben's sides lack is a deeper understanding of what's going on with the other side. When Ben wakes up and sees Luke with his lightsaber out, he doesn't know what's going on in his head, so he instantly gets aggressive. If you compare it to the fanbase, most people who didn't like the film like to ignore any good things about it and strictly focus on the flaws. Take for example the fans who say the prequels are a lot better than this movie. Now, I know a lot of people think like this, and in my opinion, I disagree. It only takes one look at both of them side by side to realize which one is clearly better in the situation. Even if I thought the story in The Last Jedi was bad, what would I rather have? A flawed story or a flawed story with bad acting?
No, you are God!
If we're gonna bring up characters being ruined, just look at Yoda. They gave him a goddamn lightsaber. Yoda flips around with the lightsaber in the prequels, and you're telling me that they ruined Luke? And the dialogue, the story, just everything. It's awful. This is a toxic community for Star Wars, and I see it literally all the time. Hell, most people didn't even see Solo because of a completely different movie with a completely different director, different writer, and they're not even in the same trilogy. The sad thing is that Solo was a great film, but since no one watched it, it won't be making anything more like it. The fans of Star Wars have divided themselves so much that it makes it seem like it's impossible to tell what the majority opinion is. Which is why I went out and asked people exactly what they thought of the movie. And this is what they said.
You're recording? I thought it was weird. The Last Jedi was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
So Last Jedi was not the worst movie ever made, but it's easily the worst Star Wars movie ever made.
What do I like more than, blocking all the haters? That is Star Wars.
I do actually respect them for doing something original, because it isn't really like any other Star Wars movie we've seen.
I thought the part where she was floating in space and then suddenly, came back to life and went back into the ship was a little bit weird.
I thought The Last Jedi was pretty good. I'm not the world's biggest Star Wars fan. I mean, I really enjoyed The Last Jedi.
I don't care. I didn't watch it.
They took it like just a completely different direction. They said, we're going to make like our own sort of original Star Wars movie.
The Last Jedi was a complete letdown.
I can't believe Rose almost tried to kill Finn.
The Last Jedi. This is probably like one of the most talked about films in years.
There were some very good set pieces. They were also kind of undone by awkward scenes, bad moments.
I don't consider these films 7, 8, and 9. I think of them more as another story in the same universe with new characters that has some connections to the original series.
Every Star Wars movie has like a different theme they're going to talk about.
I just went with my little nephew, and seeing the target audience, like a little 10-year-old, light up at it was cool.
I liked it because like it had like interesting new themes.
It was alright as films go. It should have been better.
That little lightsaber fight that he has with Kylo Ren in front of the AT-ATs, that was fucking sick.
Kylo Ren, I think they did an amazing job of exploring his character.
We can have one version of Luke who has lived a certain life and then gains new experiences, overcomes things, and then Luke later in his life who has a similar story, has similar issues, overcomes similar things without one needing to affect the other.
Fuck the Borgs.
Okay, episode 7, that was like their start. That's just so they can get back into it, they can see what the fans want. And episode 8's gonna be great. Everyone's gonna like episode 8.
The people really hated that Ruby chick. Was her name Ruby? Was that her name? Rose.
Rose is a totally terrible character, and she fucked up the perfect ending to Finn's death.
I think The Last Jedi was the best film ever made. Nearly as good as Solo, the Star Wars story. Can't wait for the Kenobi story.
And overall, I just love the characters in the films. I love how these filmmakers and writers have taken their own unique twists on the ideas of the Star Wars universe, even if it's inconsistent or whatever. I prefer it to be different. I prefer it to be challenging.
It seemed like a money grab.
They sort of took it in interesting directions, and then there were some plot lines.
Those reaction channel guys.
Yeah, it's Blasphemous HD.
He's super nice. He's lost so much weight.
Great, it's a great movie, film, great. 10 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes, 5 stars on Yelp.
For the most part, I enjoyed myself, you know.
Has there ever been like a reboot movie that wasn't like the exact same as like, a movie that came before it?
Every single pin that J.J. Abrams set up, instead of knocking them down in a perfect strike, Rian Johnson decided to set them all on fire and piss on the ashes.
No matter how right you think you are, or how many people agree with your opinion, nobody wins. Nobody. Well, except for Disney, since, they get a shitload of money.
In conclusion, this movie is for sure not as bad as everyone says it is. In fact, I'd say it's a lot better than that. This movie has so many elements that are often overlooked, and most of the time is looked at as just another Star Wars movie. But it's so much more than that. This movie has so much to do with interpretation and failure, and has a lot of themes that have never been explored in a Star Wars movie before. Everything about this movie just seems a lot more different, but in a good way. And I know that's not what a lot of people think. Most people would completely disagree with me, and I can totally understand. A lot of the concepts in this movie are very foreign to Star Wars, and I could see being upset about that as a fan. But for me, someone who wants to see new things in the Star Wars universe, I really love this movie. And on top of that, it's just a badass Star Wars movie. Luke's whole confrontation on Krayt was incredibly shot and beautifully executed. Tell me this isn't the coolest thing ever. I mean, come on. Look at this space battle. Look at this lightsaber fight. The more times I see this movie, the more I can't comprehend some of the things people say about it. Sure, the movie has its flaws, but so does every movie. The main reason I wanted to make this video is to put my sentiments out there. Because really, I feel like this movie is misunderstood. And that is why I give The Last Jedi a B-. Well, anyways, that was my video about The Last Jedi. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's been a long time coming. This one just took a really long time to process, and I wanted to take my time with it. And I know my voice sounded a little weird while making this. I still haven't really gone through the kinks of voice recording. It's kind of weird for me. I don't know. If you guys want some new content, it's gonna come up soon. So I hope you guys are still watching. Probably not.